All right, today we're going to do the fourth and final section of the Feudal Japan Notes, titled, What Foreign Ideas Did Japan Adopt and Adapt? So what ideas from outside of Japan did Japanese take on as their own? So the first thing we need to do is take a look at the difference in adopt and adapt, what those two words mean. And we're going to explain how the Japanese both adopted and adapted foreign ideas into their culture. Adopted and adapted seem like they're two very similar words. They're spelled almost identical, except for the O in adopted and the A in adapted. However, they do mean different things. So we're going to start by going to that Google form, and we're going to look up the definitions of both adopted and adapted. Okay, so go ahead and open up your Google form. Right, so section 4, the very first question, define adopt. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to type in Google definition of adopt. Okay, make sure you spell adopt correctly. Again, adopt and adapt are spelled very similarly, so you need to make sure that you're spelling the proper one. Okay, so Google definition of adopt. If you type exactly what is in the quotation marks there, you will get an answer. Now, we're not talking about adopting a child, okay? So make sure that your definition does not have anything to do with adopting a child, okay? Take a minute and look that up and pick the proper answer. Pause the video now while you do that. Right, now for number 2, we're going to do the same thing with adapt. I want you to do a Google search for definition of adapt. You can just copy and paste this if you'd like, word for word, into your Google search bar, or type that in and look up the definition of adapt and then select the proper one. Go ahead and pause this for a minute while you do that and select the proper definition once you're finished. So the definition of adopt means to choose to take up, follow, or use. So decide that you're going to use something. So in Japan's case, they adopted ideas from other places. They took the exact idea and started using it in Japan. Okay, so maybe they took the same exact thing that South Korea was doing and they started using it in Japan, so they adopted it. You take something to use it as your own. Okay, similar to if you were to adopt a child, you would take that child as your own. Okay, now the definition of adapt means to make something suitable for a new use or purpose, to modify something. So you take an idea, but you tweak it a little bit, you change it a little bit to make it match what you need it for. Okay, and then you use it in a new way. Okay, so adopt, you take the same exact idea, you use it exactly the same way. Adapt, you take an idea, change it a little bit to make it fit what you need it for, and then use it. So you modify it a little bit. Okay, so very similar, but they are a little bit different. So Japan both adopted and adapted ideas from foreign countries, so other places outside of Japan, to use within their own civilization. Okay, so the spread of traits, ideas, and products of a culture from one place to another is called what? This has been a vocab word we've been talking about this entire unit. Okay, so Japan did this. There were traits that were spread, ideas and products that were spread from one culture to another. Okay, and Japan adopted those ideas and adapted those ideas, and we call that cultural diffusion. Okay, using things from one place in another. One example in the United States would be how we have a lot of our signage written in multiple languages. You might see a sign that's in both English and Spanish. We have adopted the Spanish language on some of our signs to help those who speak Spanish more fluently to know where they need to go or what they need to do. Okay, that's one example of cultural diffusion. Going out to eat at a Chinese restaurant would be another example of cultural diffusion. Okay, taking Chinese cuisine and eating it here in the United States. Okay, anything that we take from one culture and we use in another culture, so taking something from outside of the United States and using it here in the United States, are examples of cultural diffusion. All right, we're going to take a look at document 1 below, which is a map showing the spread of Buddhism and Hinduism. All right, so I want to take a look at the map key. If you see here, the area that is shaded with lines through it shows the origin of Buddhism. We have Buddhism spread, okay, these little arrows, Buddhism spread. So this right here is the spread of Buddhism, this here is the spread of Buddhism, and here, okay. Right here was Buddhism's origin, okay, in India near Bhutan. So you can see this little tiny circle is where Buddhism started. That's the shaded area with the gray, darker gray stripes. And then Hindu influence is anywhere that's gray. So the rest of India would be Hindu influence. The rest of Southeast Asia down here into Malaysia would be Hindu influence, okay? So now that we know a little bit about what's on this map, based on this map, what two other civilizations spread foreign ideas into Japan? So I want you to find Japan on the map, locate Japan over here in the ocean, and carry it back. We're looking for the arrows that show spread of the religion of Buddhism, okay, and Hinduism, and follow it backwards, two places. We're looking for two places that spread these foreign ideas into Japan. So I see there's a little tiny arrow right here pointing into Japan. If I follow that backwards, it came from Korea. So that means Korea spread ideas into Japan. Okay, so the first place would be Korea. So let's select that answer. But then if I follow the arrow back from Korea, those ideas, follow it backwards. So here's Korea, follow that arrow backwards. Those ideas came from China. Okay, so the second civilization that spread foreign ideas into Japan was China. All right, so looking at question 5, what religion is practiced almost exclusively by the Japanese? So this is a religion, it's not shown on the map anywhere, but this religion is really only found in Japan. It, due to cultural diffusion, has spread to other areas, but it's not a very widely practiced religion, and it is mainly just found in Japan. And the answer to that is Shintoism. Okay, so the Japanese practice Shintoism, and they're almost the only people. That's what exclusively means. They're almost the only people who practice the religion of Shintoism. Question number 6, before Buddhism was introduced to Japan, remember if we look back up at this map, these arrows are showing Buddhism spread, and we can see that from where it started in India, the religion eventually spread into Japan. So before that was introduced, Shintoism, which is a religion based upon the worship of nature, was the main religion in Japan. However, Shinto Buddhism became the new religion of Japan. So what happened to the original Shintoism in Japan? Well, if they had Shintoism and then Buddhism was released into Japan, and now they call it Shinto Buddhism, it sounds like that's an example of cultural diffusion. The two religions blended together into a new religion. Took a little bit of Shintoism, a little bit of Buddhism, and mixed those together through cultural diffusion, and they then called it Shinto Buddhism. All right, for the remaining questions, I'd like you to take a look at the Prezi below, okay, titled Cultural Diffusion in Feudal Japan. So there's a link here. Go ahead and click this link and open that up. And you should see a website that looks like this when you click on that link. Okay, and what we're going to do is click the play over here. If you've never used Prezi, it's very similar to sort of like Google Slides or PowerPoint, but it's a little bit more interactive. So it moves through the slides in a little more fun way. Okay, so you see this blinking arrow down here. This tells you how you're going to go from one slide to the next. Okay, so you'll click this arrow, and this will take you to the next one. So we know that cultural diffusion is the spread of ideas from one place to another. Cultures spread and are mixed by things like war, trading, and migration, people moving from one place to another and sharing their experiences and their cultures. Okay, so we've talked about war, we've talked about trade. Migration is also another way that cultures are spread. Okay, we are specifically looking, though, if we look back at our Google form, for 5 ideas, not religion, though, since we already talked about Shintoism and Buddhism above, that Japan got from China. Okay, we listed China as one of the 2 places that spread ideas into Japan. So we want to look specifically at what some of those ideas were that spread from China into Japan. Okay, so we're going to look at the next slide here. And here is where it starts. So there are multiple slides that talk about the cultural diffusion between Japan and China. So first, Japan adopted feudalism from China. Second, the culture of China helped Japan make a civilization by borrowing China's system of government, which is a bureaucracy. Okay, so they took the government from China. And third, Japan sent young nobles, traders, and government officials to China to learn about them. Okay, so we've got 3 on this one. Okay, feudalism, and these 2 relate to government. Okay, so let's see if any of those answers are on our Google form. Well, the very first one is feudalism. Okay, we got the idea from feudalism. Transportation methods, we haven't seen anything about that yet. Bureaucracy, we did see that. Japan took China's system of government. Confucianism, we haven't seen anything about that. Ways of farming, not yet. New ways to trade with other civilizations, no mention of that. And these are the things that they would have traded. No mention of that. So let's go on to the next slide and see if we can check any more of these. Remember, we are looking for 5 things. So click this arrow down here. All right, so other things. They adopted Confucianism from China, which is a philosophy thing, like how to think about life. The second bullet, Japan's religion and philosophy also came from Korea and China. And then the third bullet, started to use new ideas and technology from China, such as new ways of farming and new measuring systems. Okay, well, some of those sound familiar. Let's go back to our Google form. So it did mention Confucianism. Okay, we took that idea of philosophy. Japan took that idea of philosophy from China. New methods of farming and measuring. Japan took that from China. That was listed here in the third one. And that was it so far. Let's see on the next slide. So trading between Japan and China. Japan traded several items such as armor, weapons, jade, cloth, combs made of shells, everyday household items. And in return, they traded pottery, wood, and rice. So let's take a look at the last one there, trade. They traded armor, weapons, jade, cloth, and combs for pottery. All right, so those are the 5 things that Japan got from China. Right? Now, the second place that Japan took a lot of their ideas from besides China was the Koreas. So let's take a look at some ideas that Japan got from Korea. Again, not religion, we've already talked about that. So we're looking for 3 from this list. Okay, let's go back to our Prezi and click the next arrow. So this is about cultural diffusion between Japan and Korea. Well, Japan adopted the civil service system from Korea. The civil service exam was required for people running for office to take an exam. Okay, this is an idea that people have a say in the government, but they need to be fit to do so. So they take the exam to make sure that they understand how the government works before they're allowed to run in it. Japan took the idea from Korea of wood block printing. They got porcelain from Korea. Japan's original religion was Shintoism until Buddhism was presented, and then we know they merged that together into Shinto Buddhism like we talked about. And then the last bullet, Confucianism, came to Japan with a Chinese scholar from a Korean kingdom. So Confucianism was kind of another cultural diffusion thing that not only blended with China and Japan, but also with Korea. Okay, so let's see on this slide which of these ideas were here. So we have the civil service system, wood block printing, porcelain, religion, and Confucianism. So plans to make the first airplane, no mention of that. That might be a little bit ahead of the time. The airplane was created much later, actually by the Wright brothers from Ohio, and they went down to South Carolina to fly their first plane. Plastic, again, not an invention back in the time period that we're talking about. The civil service system, including the exam, yes, they took that from Korea. Wood block printing, yes. And porcelain, yes, which we're all probably pretty happy to have spread the idea of porcelain because that's what most toilets are made of. All right, you have not completed section 1, section 2, and section 3. Hit submit to save, but you do need to go back and finish those so that you're not missing the points from them. Okay, but if you're all done, click submit, and your score should now be accurate if you hit view scored. All right, so after you've submitted that Google form, we're just going to recap here a few of these notes on cultural diffusion throughout Japan. So we'll go back to the Google slides. For 3 centuries, the Japanese both adopted and adapted ideas from the more advanced Chinese civilization. Okay, first they took the religions, 2 sort of religion philosophical things, Buddhism and Confucianism, which is a form of philosophy, a way to think about life in the world around you. Okay, so they took those religions. Art as well. Buddhist missionaries introduced artistic achievements. They made temple architecture that they were known for. They made sculptured figurines and many, many religious paintings that they took from the Chinese civilization. Next, they took writing and literature. The Japanese adapted the complex Chinese writing system, and they imitated Chinese writing in things like poetry, their historical writings, and Confucian classics. And remember, Confucianism is that form of philosophy. The Japanese also took examples of Chinese government. They looked up to the position of the emperor and placed the emperor on a pedestal. Even once Japan entered feudalism, they still kept that figurehead of an emperor, even though he didn't have much power. The Japanese established a centralized government, just like the Chinese had, and they also adapted the modified civil service exam. All right, thank you for listening, guys.